Grace and peace to you from God our Creator and our Lord and Savior, Jesus the Christ. Amen. Amen. For the last few years, in particular this season of Easter, I have been a little stuck. Stuck on the word truth. In particular, where Pontius Pilate proclaims in the Gospel of John, chapter 18, it says these words, "What is truth?" Now, most of us would say, well, Pilate, the truth is, well, in human form, standing right in front of you. To remind you of that particular story, that is where Jesus is on trial, going to the cross. And he is having this question and answer session, sort of, with Jesus. And Jesus proclaims that he is the truth. Then Pilate says, "What is truth?" So regardless, his question is not answered or satisfied, for we know what happens next. Jesus is sentenced to death upon that fateful cross for our sake. So what is truth? Now in this worship space, it is easy for us to proclaim that Jesus is truth. But are these words enough? So I did a little research to go beyond just those words. In our Gospel of John, chapter 8, starting with verse 31, it proclaims, "Then Jesus said, 'The Jews who had believed in him, if you continue in my word, you are truly my disciples. And you know the truth, and the truth will set you free.' And then verse 33, they answered him, 'We are descendants of Abraham and have never been slaves to anyone. What do you mean by saying you will be made free?'" Forgetting about, that little moment of time where the Hebrews were slaves in Egypt and experienced that amazing miracle of the Red Sea splitting in two. So clearly, freedom and truth are clearly misunderstood. Well, how about some more contemporary thoughts on truth? Albert Einstein once said, "Whoever is careless with truth in small matters cannot be trusted with important matters." Or Winston Churchill said, a lie gets halfway around the world before the truth has a chance to get its pants on. And there are others. So what is truth? Is it about facts? Is it about being correct? Over the years, I have come to believe that there are two ways of looking at truth. God's truth and human truth. Unfortunately, we humans like to mix the two up, God's truth and human truth, like some form of a funny drink that we buy at some bar and call it the work or movement of God. And in so doing, we suddenly can give, our truth legitimately to our viewpoint, our claim, our opinion, our power, when in reality, when we do this, it exposes how broken we really are. For example, hear the screaming we do in our neighborhoods, on our street corners, on our television sets, social media, the internet. That's not God working. That's us trying to figure out what is truth. While sometimes the answer may be clear to see, oftentimes when it comes to truth, we are blinded for one reason or another. For our life, our livelihood, we are stuck in a whole lot of gray, wondering what the answer is to our question or questions. However, there's good news. God's truth. God's truth looks a little different. So look at your gospel that we read for today, starting with verse 16, where Jesus says these words, "You did not choose me, but I chose you. And I appointed you to go and bear fruit that will last, so that the Father will give you whatever you ask him in my name." So let's put it another way. For some of us, this particular moment of time happened just a couple of years ago. And others, well, we remember when Moses was actually walking and talking with us personally. Whatever that time was, God chose to make you. God creatively and meticulously created a wonderful you. There weren't any molds made for mass reproductions. I can only imagine with me, if that were the case, where mass production was made, let's crank out Pastor Scott. And all I can say is, poor Jenny, poor family. What would they do? Thankfully, God stopped with each one of us and made just one of you. God chose you to be made. God chose you to be in relationship and claim you as somebody of worth. But there is more. God chose to be something else for you. When Jesus publicly proclaimed that he needed to die on that cross and be raised 3 days later, he was beginning a process for and dying for our sake and then being resurrected for our sake. He was no longer some distant answer to be sought after. God, through Jesus, was now a constant truth made up of 3 little letters. Yes. Sure, the world throws at you curveballs and even mud pies. God still constantly is saying yes to who you are. Sure, the world is containing death and yelling and screaming. God is still again saying yes to hope and life and resurrection just for you. Sure, there are days and weeks and maybe even years that don't seem to go your way because of this reason or the next. Hear God saying yes to you as someone who is constantly loved and who deserves to be loved in return. So I go back to my original question. What is truth? Truth is God. Truth is God who boldly affirms you in the positive, choosing you. Truth is God who loves us on the cross, in resurrection in our life and forevermore. Follow that truth. God is truth, and he will set you free. Amen.